So in understanding the makeup of the dog, which is the predator, the wolf, we have to look at why dogs do certain things and why they don't. So if we look at the aspect of positive training or a reward-based system, as I said, as long as the dog's desire for the object, the positive object, the reward object, is greater than its natural predatory instinct to chase, kill, and eat, the dog will opt for your reward. So if you put the dog on a sit and you tell the dog, come, and you have a treat, the dog's desire for that treat will outweigh his natural instinct to be lazy and not come. So he'll come and he'll get the treat. Now, if you tell the dog to stay, and when he stays, he gets the treat, he'll stay because he wants that treat. But if a chicken or a rabbit runs by and that triggers his natural predatory instinct to sight, scent, hunt, kill, and eat that rabbit, that will outweigh his desire to get the little treat from your hand. And that's where oftentimes positive training will fall apart. And we have to look at that in a real clear, a real sterile situation. We don't want to really slam positive training because positive training has so many benefits. It can really develop a solid behavior between us. It can develop a great relationship between us. It can develop a lot of fun times and stuff like that. But it falls apart because the dog's ingrained nature is going to be survival. And the more drive a dog has, the more natural instinct the dog has for whether that's aggression or prey drive or defensive drive, which all kind of fall in the same category, which we're going to talk about when we get to drives, the behavior of the dog or the desired behavior that we're trying to shape will fall apart. So if he sees a chicken crossing the road or a chicken crossing in a field in front of him, then he'll probably chase the chicken rather than sit for you and know that he's going to get the mark, which is the reward or the treat. If he thinks there's a negative implication to him getting up to go chase that rabbit, now that can be an electric collar correction, it can be a yank on a pinch collar, it can be a physical maneuver with you putting him back and correcting him, and he understands that your physical pressure, your physical strength will outweigh his physical strength, then he will defer to you. So when I look at someone who will never correct a dog but will only mark the good behaviors and tries to ignore the bad behaviors, which is kind of the concept of positive only training, and I think it's wonderful. Trust me, I'm a much more positive trainer than I am a compulsion-based trainer. But think about it from the dog's perspective for a minute. He's sitting in a stay. You tell him to stay, you walk back to him, you give him a treat, good boy. You say stay, you walk back, you give him a treat, good boy. He gets up and he walks around and you say, nope. You wait till he goes back and he sits down and you give him a reward again. He's getting it that as long as he's sitting there, he gets a reward. But there's no negative implication. There's no negative reinforcer to make him say, oh, when I get up, I get in trouble. You don't really get in trouble. You just don't get the reward. So he'll decide, okay, well, you know what? If I want to go over here and sniff the grass and my desire to pee or poo or do whatever is greater than my desire for that treat or your praise or the toy, then he'll do whatever he's going to do. But the scary part is because dogs are domestic animals, we need that negative reinforcer to let them know that we're not going to accept that negative behavior. Right, so if we have a German Shepherd, and he's sitting on a sit, and I say stay or tell him to down or whatever the command is, and a kid rides by on a bicycle and he has crazy prey drive and he wants to go chase that kid on the bicycle and knock it down just in a play mode. Let's forget about the aggression mode, right? And there's no negative reinforcement to stop him from doing that. Why would he do it, right? When he does it, I say, nope, 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 and I wait for him to go back to his place. And when he gets there, I mark it and I go, good boy. Well, he's gotten two good boys, right? He's gotten the good boy of chasing the kid on a bicycle or the cat or the squirrel or the bird or whatever it is, and he gets the attaboy when he sits back in his place. That's where we need to put a negative reinforcer, and that's when a dog is going to need a correction. So when we have a dog that's dog reactive, right? Dog reactivity is one of the biggest things that we're going to have to deal with in shelter dogs and rescue dogs, right? So when the dog has that negative desire to lunge out and snap at that dog, bark at that dog, or bite that dog, which all aggression is reactive. Talking about dog aggression, it's all reactive. Whether real or perceived, it's the dog's reaction to something. And reaction can be a fear, right? He sees the dog, he thinks that dog is going to attack him, he's going to bite him. So aggression becomes the reaction to a thought, a perceived thought. It might be, if the dog's lunging at him, he lunges forward, then it's a reaction that we could see. But a dog can read body language. He might think that dog is being aggressive. And that's as real as anything, right? They've done studies that people, marathon runners who can close their eyes and focus on running the marathon, they can get their heart rate up and their muscles stressed in the exact same way as a real marathon runner. So for a dog, that perception is just as real as the aggression. So when a dog acts aggressively, whether we think it's proactive or reactive, whether we see the action or we don't see the action, the aggression, the reactivity of that dog is going to be something we need to counter, right? And waiting for him to stop and using a positive marker at that point isn't enough to block the negative action of him lunging at that other dog or, God forbid, that person. He has a suspicion of people with hats, of mailmen, of people in uniform, of people of color, or people of different nationalities, which happens in dogs if they're not properly exposed to it. If they have that, we're going to go back to, because that's a predatory instinct. That's something a predator would do. Your pet dog, your Labradoodle who's never had that kind of pressure is less likely to do it than a dog that's more predatorial in their drives. So the reactivity to that must be countered by a negative implication. And if we can physically maneuver the dog by an interrupted behavior, which could be a yank on a leash, it could be a correction on a pinch collar, it could be a correction on an electric collar, it could be a disabling of the dog so that he can't do that behavior. Whatever that is, the dog will start to identify that the negative that you've put on him outweighs his desire to do something, right? Because if the dog was in the wild and ran at another dog and a tree fell and clocked him in the head, he would think, well, I'm not going to chase after that dog anymore because last time I chased after him, the tree fell. He's not going to think it was happenstance. So we need the dog to identify that negative with us, right? He needs to identify that our authority, our role as his pack leader, which is a term I hate using because of the guy on TV, but because of that position that we hold with him, it's our job to control him from doing anything that will endanger us as well as endanger him. Because if he goes and attacks the other dog, two things can happen. One, he can get killed by the other dog, or two, he can kill the other dog or damage the other dog and then end up being put down in the shelter. Nothing good will come of that, right? But we need a negative interrupter to stop that. And that goes back down to the dog's predatory skills. And I should say the dog's predatory instinct, which shapes his skill as a dog. A dog is not going to attack a 600-pound lion, right? It's just not going to happen. But a lion will attack a 100-pound dog. And if even leopards in the wild in Africa eat dogs all the time. It's their favorite thing to eat is dogs and baboons because they know they can kill them. They're more of an apex predator than a dog. A dog is not the greatest predator. A good predator, not the greatest predator. So the reason I want you to understand the genetic makeup of the dog and understand how it shares its DNA with the wolf is because in that core issue, when we get to a core problem with the dog, and that's really what we face a lot in the shelter, is a core problem. The dog is severely aggressive in this and this situation, okay? Obviously, the positive training didn't work, so we need a negative in there. Now, here at the shelter, we're not going to use electric collars, we're not going to use pinch collars. In my private training, I do. But we are going to use a correction on a leash to get the dog to redirect to us. And we're going to abundantly reward the right behavior, right? We're going to put a correction, pop, on the bad behavior. We're not going to beat up the dog. We're not going to hit the dog. We're not going to flip the dog on his back and do some nonsense like that, right? We're going to correct the dog on a leash as hard as the dog needs to be corrected. And that is with a slip lead. That's all we're going to use. And when the dog does the right thing, we're going to reward the dog abundantly. When he does the wrong thing, we're going to say no, and we're going to block the behavior. Any kind of aggression or reactive behavior, which again goes to a predatory nature in a dog, needs to be hit immediately, right? And I don't mean hit like hit, it means to be targeted immediately, and we need to correct it quickly. Because once the dog gets into the elevated drive of aggression or reactivity, it's harder and harder to pull the dog back down. It's like if somebody's getting sad, and then we can kind of pull them out of the sadness by telling them a happy story. But if they're in this crazy sadness that's elevated and elevated and elevated and elevated, it's much harder to pull them down, right? So the more you can do to preemptively undo or squash any kind of a reactive or aggressive behavior, the sooner it'll work. And that's what I want you to do with the dogs in the yard. I want you to take the dog out, get him to focus on you. If he has a reactivity to another dog, start to focus on getting him back to you, triggering back to you. The more he focuses back to you, the less he focuses on the other dog. By hook or crook, you got to get the dog to focus back to you, because the more the dog focuses on the other dog or the aggression, if that's to a person or a dog, the more that dog is likely to continue in that escalated state. And like I say, going back to what we talked about originally with positive training, we can't reinforce the positive if the dog is not offering the positive, right? We kind of almost have to force the dog to do something good, right? And that's fine, right? We're here really to save the dog's life. And if the positive thing would have worked, he probably wouldn't have ended up here. Maybe one slips through the crack, I don't know. But it's rare that I see a dog here that is just based on positive, positive, positive. Once in a while, they might need a little correction on the leash. And I'm hoping you'll give it to them, you give them a chance to live, okay? If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel.